In the United States, a new type of infection has spread across the country, turning the population into an army of zombies. Faced with the growing threat of the unliving, the president began a process of isolation, surrounding several cities with walls. In addition, a drug called Zombrex was created, which keeps the pathogen inactive inside the human body. The medicine was delivered throughout the country, but the government had other plans for Zombrex. In one of the cities under isolation, called East Mission, reporter Chase Carter and his sidekick, Jordan Blair, investigated the source of the infection. They discovered that the army and the American government were behind the zombie outbreak in the city. The aim was not only to deliver the Zombrex, but to use this as an excuse to implant tracking chips in all the infected. In the midst of this chaos, Chase managed to escape the city and Jordan recorded on camera all the evidence of the army's involvement, led by General Lyons. However, during her escape, she was captured by government agents and her whereabouts remain a mystery. 2 years after the outbreak, East Mission has become a ghost town, with the military using the place as a base for their secret plans. In the meantime, Chase returns to the city and follows a military convoy to the parking lot of a building. He manages to get in with the help of his girlfriend and hacker, Sandra, fellow journalist Jill and Zane, an informant who showed him the location of the secret base. Chase's plan is to break into the building and discover the army's plans, but Zane refuses and demands his share of the money. The reporter hands over the payment, a pistol to defend himself, and then sneaks into the building, taking his camera with him. Inside, Chase sees General Lyons talking to a crime boss known as Skinner about a project called Afterlife. However, the conversation is interrupted when Skinner's men find Zane and take him to their boss. Chase watches and transmits everything on his camera to Sandra, but she can do nothing to help him. Finally, Skinner eliminates Zane with his knife and one of his henchmen sees Chase watching and triggers the alarm. The reporter flees to a warehouse, where he finds several zombies packed in plastic bags. One of them manages to break free and attacks Chase, but he knocks it to the ground and destroys its head with a chair. Chase then manages to find a way out and flees into the alley, with the military and Skinner's henchmen chasing after him. The reporter manages to lose them, but another zombie appears in front of him and Chase is forced to defend himself, hitting the creature with an iron pipe. The zombie still resists and presses him against the wall, but Chase pushes him towards a sharp iron bar and hits him on the head, eliminating him for good. Afterwards, the reporter goes out into the street and finds Sandra, who is happy to see that he's okay, but then slaps him for risking himself like that. Even so, they manage to record the entire conversation on video and set off to show everything to the newspaper editor. To everyone's disappointment, the editor forbids the videos to be released, as the recording is not enough to incriminate the army and the entire newspaper staff will become a target of the government. The reporter is furious about this, as he has risked his life for nothing and his partner Jordan is still missing. In addition, his relationship with Sandra is not going well, as she realizes that her boyfriend is obsessed with this investigation, putting his life at risk at every turn. Seeing her colleague's situation, Jill calls Chase to go to a bar and try to relax a bit. Over the course of the evening, the reporter goes to the bathroom and meets a guy called George Hancock. He claims to be an executive from the Phenotrans company, the creator of Zombrex, and that he has secret information about the Afterlife project. However, he warns that the two of them need to get out of there, because the military already know about Chase's involvement and are after him. Seconds later, the military show up at the bar, but George knows a way out through the top of the building and the two flee in his car. On the way, George explains that the Afterlife project is a containment plan to eliminate all the infected who have the tracking chip. When the project is activated, the chip will release high doses of Zombrex, causing the victims to be eliminated. Under the command of General Lyons, the project will be carried out in 24 hours, and if it isn't stopped, more than 1 million people who have the chip will lose their lives. When he learns the truth, Chase vows to prevent the Afterlife project from being carried out, as Sandra is one of the victims with the chip. He then asks his group to meet him at the home of Garth, an old friend and supplier of various weapons. Once there, Chase explains the whole situation and Garth readily agrees to help, as he has a debt to pay to his friend. With this reinforcement, George passes on the coordinates, revealing that there is a secret base in East Mission, with a server that activates the Afterlife project. The group needs to break into the building, plug in a USB stick with the access program he created, and finally prevent the project from being carried out. If all goes well, they will be rescued by a friend of Chase's called Chuck. He also has a daughter who has the chip and will do his best to prevent her from being eliminated if the Afterlife is activated. With everything ready, the group prepares to head to East Mission, but Chase asks Jill to stay, as he needs someone to relay the story to the public in case things don't end well. Hours later, the group arrives at an old factory with a secret tunnel to the city. In the meantime, General Lyons discovers that George Hancock is Chase's informant and goes to confront the owner of Phenotrans, Susan Ingot. When she meets the general, she tells him that she also found out about his plans to activate the Afterlife Project and is against the idea. However, Lyons doesn't want to risk another zombie outbreak, and in addition to authorizing the project, he sends his subordinate, Captain Smith, to go after Chase and George. The captain obeys the order and his investigations lead him to Garth's house, where Jill is waiting for information from Chase. When she hears the sound of the agents arriving, she hides on the balcony of the building, but ends up leaving her laptop on the table. Upon breaking into the apartment, Captain Smith finds the laptop and discovers Chase's plans to prevent the afterlife. He then passes on all the information to the military base and authorizes the use of weapons against the reporter and his entire team. Back in the tunnel, Chase finds bodies scattered on the floor, indicating that there has been a recent confrontation. The group thinks it best to take another route, but as they enter a room, Garth is caught in a trap, and soon after, Skinner and his men appear and take the rest of the group hostage. The crime boss orders Chase and the others to be taken to another room, leaving Garth hanging in the trap to be interrogated. When they get there, they find a room full of chemicals, and Chase tries to pass himself off as a Lyons agent, who has been sent to deliver a message. Skinner, however, doesn't believe this and threatens to take Sandra elsewhere so that he can interrogate her. This provokes the fury of Chase, who pushes the table towards the henchmen, with George hitting one of them with a glass vial. A confrontation breaks out and Chase, together with Sandra, set off to confront Skinner. At the same time, Garth is attacked with a baseball bat by one of the goons, but he manages to disarm her and uses the bat to finish her off. Garth then pulls a knife from his pocket and breaks free from the rope, heading for the living room to help the rest of the group. When he gets there, he finds Chase knocking Skinner to the floor, followed by Sandra, who plunges a knife into the man's leg. Finally, Garth shoots the rest of the henchmen, but the chemicals fall to the floor and the room starts to catch fire. Everyone rushes to get out of there and narrowly escapes the explosion. Unfortunately, all their equipment and weapons, with the exception of George's flash drive, have been destroyed. To make matters worse, the explosion begins to attract several zombies to the tunnels, and Chase notices that one of them looks different from the others. This zombie runs at high speed towards the group and manages to grab Garth, biting him on the neck. Chase goes to help his friend and stomps on the zombie's head, until he finds a strange code tattooed on its neck. After this, the group continues their escape towards the end of the tunnel, only to find the exit locked. Without their weapons, they grab whatever tools they can find to hit the zombies, until Garth manages to destroy the door handle and they make it out of the tunnel. The group reaches a workshop and Garth is seriously injured by the bite. Sandra rushes to use a dose of Zombrex to prevent his transformation into a zombie, but they are still without weapons or equipment to continue the mission. Fortunately, Chase finds several items in the workshop and together they all begin to assemble makeshift weapons to face the zombies. Minutes later, the group heads into town, now armed with sticks equipped with saws, razors, and even a screwdriver. They need to hurry, as there are less than 6 hours until the Afterlife Project is executed. The four of them take a shortcut through the hospital, but soon afterwards, a military convoy appears on the scene and 2 agents go out to investigate. Chase and the others hide in the hospital parking lot and, as soon as the agents leave, they activate a flare to see in the dark. At the same moment, more zombies appear and begin to surround the place, including the evolved versions they found in the tunnels. One of them jumps on Chase, but Garth saves him with his makeshift flail. The group continues to face the zombies, but they are outnumbered and they need to make their way to the hospital entrance. The situation becomes increasingly critical and other zombies of the new species jump on Garth and are about to bite him. However, they smell something different and stop attacking, indicating that Garth is still infected. The confrontation continues and George and Sandra continue to fight the zombies, but one of them knocks the young woman to the ground and tries to bite her. She defends herself by activating the flare and hitting the infected in the mouth, which burns its throat. Nearby, Chase picks up one of the cars and starts it to run over the zombies, but they jump on top of the vehicle and try to break the windshield. Among them, Garth appears, now a zombie infected by the new pathogen, and not even the Zombrex was able to stop his transformation. Chase regrets his friend's fate, but he hurries to find George and Sandra, who have managed to reach the hospital entrance. The reporter tries to follow them, but one of the zombies manages to get through the windshield and tries to bite him. Chase hits him with a flashlight and manages to escape from the car through the rear window, where he comes across Garth once again. The zombie advances towards him and, with no other choice, the reporter uses his weapon and hits it on the head with the saw, eliminating it for good. After that, Chase runs to the stairs and, after locking the door, he tries to talk to Sandra on the communicator, but no one answers. He then follows the stairs and finds the hospital's corridor of rooms, where he comes across yet another zombie. In one swift movement, Chase slides to the ground and strikes the zombie in the leg, followed by several blows to its head. Chase believes he is out of danger, but as soon as he crosses the corridor, another zombie attacks him by surprise and tackles him to the ground. The reporter almost gets bitten, but he dodges the attack and uses his staff to hit the zombie in the head. The situation goes from bad to worse when more monsters start appearing, so Chase flees towards the hospital escalator. He climbs down the railing and, with his weapon, begins to saw off the heads of the zombies, one after the other. At the end of the railing, Chase leaps towards another zombie, hitting it square in the head with the saw. After that, he jumps onto another escalator, but this time the zombies manage to pull him up by his clothes and prepare to devour him. Just when it seemed too late, a mysterious young woman appears on the scene and eliminates the creatures with a few well-aimed shots. She then takes the fire extinguisher and destroys the skull of another zombie, revealing it to be Jordan, Chase's old partner. With no time to explain, she tells him to follow her, as they need to get to safety. With 4.5 hours to go until Afterlife is activated, Jill goes to meet the editor of the newspaper to ask for his help. Even knowing the risks, this time he accepts and brings along Susan's assistant, who has important information about the involvement of phenotrans in the army. He reveals that the organization's scientist, Dr. Rand, is responsible for the execution of Afterlife. In exchange for his services, he has demanded that the army provide him with guinea pigs for his cruel experiments, which are supposedly aimed at finding a cure for the zombie infection. Since then, Susan has been funding his research, because if he finds a cure, her company will be the only one to market it. Because of this, the owner of Phenotrans is against the idea of Afterlife, because if those infected with the chip are eliminated, the pathogen will cease to exist and her company will go bankrupt, seeing his boss's greedy intentions. His assistant decided to give Jill the evidence on a USB stick. With this, they will be able to remove her from control of the company and prevent other people from falling victim to her plans. Back at the hospital, Chase tries to talk to Jordan and asks what has happened to her all this time. He tells her that he released her recordings revealing the army's involvement in the zombie outbreak, but no one believed them and they ruined his reputation as a reporter. Finally, he apologizes to Jordan for abandoning her, but she doesn't reply and just assembles weapons to face the zombies. Seconds later, one of her colleagues appears, bringing along Sandra and George, who have managed to escape alive. Chase is happy to see them, but says that Garth hasn't been as lucky, as he has been infected by a new type of pathogen. He also introduces Sandra to his friend Jordan, but she still doesn't say anything. Then her colleague reveals the tragic fate of Jordan, who was used as a guinea pig by Dr. Rand to test new forms of the pathogen. Luckily, they both managed to escape, but he was bitten by a zombie and will soon become another zombie. This only makes Chase even more motivated to continue with his mission, but he doesn't want to take Jordan back to the place where she was made a guinea pig. Nevertheless, she agrees to accompany them, as she is the only one who knows how to get in and out of the secret base. So, with only an hour left, the group heads to the site, with Jordan's colleague deciding to stay because he knows he will soon become a zombie. Minutes later, they find the base and access it through a secret tunnel that only Jordan knows about. When they get there, they find the lower floor, where Dr. Rand's guinea pigs are, who didn't resist his macabre experiments. Jordan then easily eliminates the guards with his spear and leads the group to the server room, where they meet a soldier called Todd. Jordan attracts his attention, while Chase, Sandra and George take him out in a surprise attack. As soon as George gets the drive connected to the server, Sandra starts the process to block the execution of the Afterlife project. However, there are still 20 minutes before the procedure is completed and the invasion is detected by one of General Lyon's soldiers. When he learns of this, he tries to stop the process, but to no avail, so all that remains is to postpone uploading the file to the USB stick for as long as necessary. In the meantime, Jordan remembers all the pain she felt during the experiments and sets off alone in search of Dr. Rand. Knowing that he can't abandon her once again, Chase runs after her and promises Sandra that he'll come back for her. Minutes later, Jordan finds the laboratory and sees a doctor similar to Dr. Rand, operating on one of the guinea pigs. Without hesitation, she thrusts her spear into the doctor's neck, only to discover that it wasn't Rand. In a surprise attack, the real scientist appears behind her and attacks her with a taser, knocking her unconscious. Back in the server room, the file upload is even slower and demands that Todd tell them how to circumvent the general's access. He initially refuses, but Sandra tells him that the blood of many lives will be on their hands if they don't stop this project. In the midst of a crisis of conscience, the subject gives him the password to block Lyon's access. Despite this, The general discovers that the invasion is taking place at the secret East Mission base and orders a jet to be sent to destroy the entire building. Meanwhile, in the lab, Chase meets the scientist who has just used a new species of the pathogen on Jordan. The reporter tries to stop him and, discreetly, he transmits the whole conversation to Sandra, thus collecting more evidence in the investigation. The scientist reveals that both the army and Phenotrans have given up on finding a cure for the zombie virus. Nevertheless, he persisted in his research, using healthy guinea pigs like Jordan to find not only a way to reverse the infection, but to turn it into the next step in human evolution. The doctor believes that since the pathogen prevents the victim from losing their life, if he can recombine it, he can find the secret to immortality. However, he needed to give something to the army and Phenotrans in order to continue with his experiments, so he developed the Afterlife Project. In the middle of his speech, Jordan begins to have a strange reaction, indicating that the pathogen used is spreading through her system. Dr. Rand then gives Chase a choice, to use the antidote and end the chance of creating a cure, or to let her be infected and continue with his research. Before Chase can decide, George appears in the lab and discharges his pistol at the scientist. He then takes out a compartment from his pocket containing the samples of the antidotes that Dr. Rand created. George then reveals his real plan, which was to steal the scientist's cure and thus become the new owner of Phenotrans. To avoid leaving any witnesses, he shoots at Chase, but the reporter manages to dodge and George flees the lab. Afterwards, the reporter tries to help Jordan and asks Sandra to find the number of the vial containing the antidote in the system. With her hacking skills, she finds the information and Chase goes to the closet to get the sample to save Jordan. However, the situation is about to get worse, because before fleeing, George goes to the building's control system and frees all the guinea pigs. As a result, dozens of zombies run around the base, hungry for flesh. Several of them begin to enter the server room and Todd tells Sandra to hurry, or all her efforts will have been in vain. Seeing that there are still minutes to go until the end of the upload, the young woman grabs a pair of pliers from the cupboard and removes the chip from her shoulder, just in case she doesn't manage to deactivate the afterlife in time. She also gets a dose of Zombrex from an emergency box and sees on the computer that the program on the USB stick has finally blocked the system. Now everyone has to get out of there, but Todd doesn't get the chance, as he is knocked down by the zombies and eaten alive. Sandra can no longer help him and flees with the Zombrex to the elevator, heading for the top of the building. She waits for Chase, who is about to use the drug on Jordan, but in a matter of seconds, the lab is surrounded by several zombies. Chase uses the resources he finds in the lab to defend himself against the zombies, until he takes back his staff with the saw. In a sequence of attacks, he eliminates everyone and manages to inject the medicine into Jordan, who wakes up free of the pathogen. The two then rush to the roof, where they find Sandra facing the zombies. In addition to her, Chuck appears with the helicopter, firing his gun at the creatures and throwing one of them into the helicopter's propellers. As soon as they make way, everyone escapes in the ship, seconds before the military jet arrives at the base and fires missiles at the entire building. Thanks to Chase, Sandra and Jordan, all the people with the implanted chip have been saved. Hours later, George has also escaped from the city through the tunnel and celebrates that his plan has worked. To his misfortune, his path is blocked by Captain Smith, who takes him out with one shot. The captain continues to investigate the tunnel and leaves the victim's body to be devoured by the zombies. However, he doesn't notice when George's hand makes a sudden movement, indicating that he has used Dr. Rand's antidote on himself and may have achieved the immortality that the scientist so desired. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.